for me, I go where I feel like the transaction makes the most sense, right? So I do a lot of VA loans. Last year I think we were a little bit over 75% of what we did was VA. So we do a lot of them, and the big thing in that community, especially nowadays, is your ability to buy a multifamily with your VA loan with no money down.
Welcome back to CashFlow, the podcast where we talk about turning properties into profits. I'm your host, Jason Yoss, and today my special guest is Chris Catania. Chris, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to have you on. I know we talked a lot about, offline, getting you in here. Yeah. I got a lot of things I want to touch base on, but I really appreciate you joining me, so I want to get into it.
Yeah, sounds good, man. It'd be fun. I know there's been a lot going on. We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we do. We were already deep in it before we even get on here. Yeah. So Chris, loan officer, you run C Group out of Fairway Independent Mortgage. Is that correct?
Yeah. Right. So C Group is like a culmination of a couple different teams, mortgage loan officers that kind of under the banner. So the C Group is like the overarching brand that we have. Yeah.
Nice. And you've been doing this for a while. How long exactly mortgages?
I got into the business in December of 2005. So I started off the business was totally different back then. So I got hired by a guy that I went to high school with. He was working for his uncle, told me I should come work for him. I didn't know what the hell he did or what it meant. Right. All of a sudden I'm a telemarketer at a mortgage company. And I just kind of got stuck in a good way. So I've been there ever since. So it's almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years at the end of this year.
In 2005, did you have to have a separate LO license, or was it all?
That wasn't even a thing yet. Yeah, it was your real estate license. So I had to wait until I was old enough to take the real estate test.
I love it.
So, but yeah. So yeah, that's all. I mean, we've seen the run up to 05, 06, and then 07, 08, and the years that followed.
Up, down.
Then the big upswing again. I feel like the little lesser talked about upswing that was between what was that 12 and 15, right? So
people got confidence again, and all of a sudden it was like whoosh.
Yep. Yeah.
And then then super hardcore 2019, 20, and then it kind of leveled off when rates went from 1% back to normal.
Yeah. Yeah. I just had that conversation yesterday. Yeah. It's like rates are so high, and I was like, actually they're lower than they were before they were really low. So but it's all perspective.
It is perspective, and especially when somebody is reflecting on a 2 or 3% rate.
Yeah,
so,
right, yeah.
In addition to being in the real estate industry, something I got to point out, near and dear to my heart, you're also a veteran.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your service.
Yeah, I was in the Army. I did just right over 9 years in the Army. Most of that time in the reserve. So I was actually doing both, right, running the mortgage business and serving in uniform, which was cool. It was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It came with its challenges. It's hard to run a business, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, you're going to be gone for a month or 2 or 3 or whatever it is, and then try to come back, especially in this day and age. And a lot of the times when you leave on those things, you don't have great connectivity or at all. So you're just kind of like, hey, I wonder how my business is there when I get home. I hope it's all going okay.
Right.
Yeah.
We talked about this too, also being enlisted, especially maybe an older, more mature business owner enlisted coming in as I want to use the term boot, but coming in fresh.
Yeah.
It's a little different to listen to a 22-year-old, corporal or sergeant tell you, and you're like, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah.
You can't even bounce your checkbook.
Right. Yeah. You run a pretty big business in the civilian world, and then you're being told to mop the parking lot by some
paint the rocks, please.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Go mow the lawn or whatever.
So as you got in and you've been doing this for a while, do you have a coach or mentor that helps steer you, or are you the one coaching and mentoring? Yeah.
So, I mean, a little bit of both, right? So I think lifelong learning is got to be a core value if you intend to be, if you intend to be successful for any period of time. So I'm always trying to absorb from people around me. I came up with a mentor, the guy that kind of got me in the business for a long time. I looked at and watched and had conversations with. Nowadays, I do coach other loan officers and salespeople. So I coach them, but I'm also part of groups of peers. So I have, definitely people that I look up to that, are doing different things in business. Some are doing a little less, but they're doing it totally different. Some are doing a lot more. And they're just, what I find too is sometimes those people are just executing the basics at a higher level.
Do you think that the leadership and did they have any formal training in the Army? Obviously, I know the Marine Corps has some leadership depending on where you go. But did that help influence your ability to lead a team, run a company after spending that time in the Army?
Yeah. I think like in the military, like specifically what we did. We're in a paratrooper unit. We're in PSYOP civil affairs, so it's like you got to be pretty sharp to do what we do. There's a fair amount of training. You got to be pretty disciplined. But at the same time, you have to be really kind of used to doing things through adversity and under adversity. Like and I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. Yeah, there's leadership training, but then there's also just training on how to drive through and do things in difficult situations and maintain composure, especially if you're in charge of other people and you have to be the leader. You have to, leaders eat last. You got to make sure they're taken care of. So I think that's probably some of the bigger takeaways I took away from the Army is just the overall mindset. And then like the fact that nothing is hard. Like, we're
afterwards you're like, that's why am I jumping up and down? That's not anywhere near what I was doing before.
Yeah. Or just like, things happen at work and you're like, nobody's going to die.
Dying.
Yeah. Everybody's good. Nothing's going to happen. I mean, it'll be stressful. You'll wake up, the sun will set.
It'll be here tomorrow.
Sun will rise in the morning. No big deal. So a lot of that I think is the biggest impact.
That's great mindset. And I do want to give props to our services because they are able to kind of put that mindset piece that you're talking about. Now, as we focus your career, not just in mortgage, but in real estate investing in general, talk to me about philosophy. What's your mindset when it comes to your own investment portfolio?
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of a little bit all over the place, right? So we've had commercial property, bought and sold. We've got multi-unit here in Southern California. We've got single family in Texas. We've got single family here in Southern California. So, I think that for me, I go where I feel like the transaction makes the most sense, right? So I do a lot of VA loans. Last year I think we were a little bit over 75% of what we did was VA. Nice. So we do a lot of them, and the big thing in that community, especially nowadays, is your ability to buy a multifamily with your VA loan with no money down. Right. And sometimes that is like in the Southern California market, that makes a ton of sense. But when you start looking at other markets, like we own single family in San Antonio because San Antonio is a single family market. Right. So we're like, okay, where is the dollar best spent? What are the businesses moving into the area? Where are the military bases? Where's my built-in tenant base that I know is going to pay their mortgage? And then what do they want to rent? Right. Okay, they don't want to rent a duplex because if you live in multifamily in San Antonio, for the most part, it's less desirable areas or maybe less desirable tenant profile. You got
to be careful about getting the wrong area with the wrong tenants.
Yeah.
When you have people come to you, like borrowers, you see a common mistake that they're making that you're kind of like, hey, like you need to look out for this, whether it be budgets or anything like that.
Yeah, it's, for sure. So we recommend probably different than a lot of people in our space. Like, I don't want to ever say anything bad about anybody of my peers, but I don't think everybody comes from the same like advisory position.
Sure.
And I think that when you get to a certain level of doing this, like you can become a little bit detached from the outcome. Yeah. So if I have to talk to somebody and I have to tell them that I don't really actually think that makes sense, I don't think they're in the space, even though they can finance it, like I don't feel like they can afford it or it's not the right decision. Right. We do that. We have those conversations pretty frequently with people. And so I see two mistakes that get made. People get excited and then they over leverage themselves because they're excited. And maybe it doesn't work out so that it's terrible, but maybe it's not comfortable and they experience more pain in the process than they otherwise would have had they been more prepared.
Risk-averse type of mentality, right?
Well, not even risk averse. They're willing to take the risk, but because they got so excited about the one-liners and everybody talking about this and that on the internet, and then the fact that maybe they go to a service provider that doesn't unpack their finances and goes, yeah, I can get you qualified. Like, here's your thing. Or it's the other side. People, sit on the sidelines way too long because they're so risk averse, to your point, that they don't want to get off the couch and they stay on the fence. Like I've literally been having conversations with people from 2015 that are still waiting
for rates to drop.
Or like there's some instability. I don't know what's going to happen.
Waiting for the housing market to crash.
Yeah.
Good job waiting.
The phone rang for COVID and it's like, this is it. It's crashing. And then
tell me what we were talking about before. You have, and not to throw this prospect under the bus, but somebody that you've been talking to for that long, and how much money has he potentially left on the table because of waiting for the market?
Yeah. So we had a client that we worked with. he was here on military orders for a period of time. He didn't buy. He wasn't sure. And then he went on somewhere else. Then he came back, ended up being back here. So we did like an exercise, and we're like, hey, this is how much money you've had in rent and housing allowance from the military. Yeah. Here's how much that house has appreciated since you didn't pull the trigger. And it was like a $750,000 swing.
Yeah, over just 6 years.
From 7 years, yeah.
7
so
years.
From 15 to 22, I think it was, yeah. Which is like, I mean, for most people, that's a life-changing number. Like most people listening, if I was like, hey, I'm depositing $750 into your account today, like that's a life-changing amount of money, right? Yeah. So it's
an extra $100,000 a year, give or take. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no big deal.
Let's talk a little bit about some deals. I know you've been a part of some good and some not so good.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, be careful when you get into the rental space, especially in California, because the tenants hold all the cards. And I know you talked to me a little bit about what turned out to be a great deal at the end, but didn't start off so well. Talk to me about that Oceanside project.
Yeah. So one of the things about multifamily investing is you're dealing with multiple families, right? So you gotta understand that there's all these different personalities, there's all these different financial situations, and a lot of times when you buy a multifamily project, whether it's 4 or 14, you're inheriting a bunch of those tenants usually, right? And then you don't know exactly what the track record is, and that seller, I don't want to throw them under the bus, but they always paint a rosy picture.
They may not be as forthcoming as we want them. Well, break down the scenario for me. What was the opportunity? Where was it? Let's kind of go to that. So we said Oceanside.
So Oceanside, it's a 4-unit property. You want like the details on the specifics? Yeah. So
I want our listeners to kind of get a feel of like how you came on this opportunity and put it together, which I think was great. And then maybe that unexpected issue that may or may not have arisen, and how you dealt with that.
So it's in Oceanside. If you know the San Diego area, it's off the 76, kind of in between College and like where that Lowe's is. They're off 76. Easy access to the beach, easy access to the base. Right. If you go the other direction, 78's not too far, 15's not too far down 76. So pretty good location, right? So real estate location. That's the easy stuff. That's the thing that everybody knows. So check the box there.
Right.
It's a 4-unit, $1.75 million.
Okay. And how'd you find it again? Where
it was listed incorrectly. It was listed as single family because it has a single family like detached home in the front, and then it has 3 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartments in the back. So it was listed as single family. So it wasn't getting the traffic that it probably should have at the time. And it was also in a price point where if you're in Oceanside looking in that area, your search isn't set for 1.75. Right. That's not a 1.75 single family neighborhood, right? But it is a 1.75 4-unit neighborhood, right?
That makes sense.
So we ended up going in there. Tough negotiating. The seller was kind of stuck where they wanted. We were looking for a big credit at the time, and so we ended up not coming and seeing eye to eye on the number that we wanted on the credit. Right? So we're going in. We're using VA financing, 0 down, and we needed repairs. There was stuff that needed to be done. Okay. They wouldn't come to the table with what we were asking for, so the transaction actually ended up canceling.
Really?
Yeah, and then so we go. Good cop, bad cop. The deal's canceled for like a week. My partner who's doing the loan for me ends up calling the seller's agent and saying, "Hey, we've got this loan clear to close. Like, what are we doing? I heard it canceled. We're ready to like sign papers." And so they came back to the table. Right. We ended up, coming to a number that was much more favorable to us. So we ended up getting into the property with like a $65,000 credit. So it paid for all of our closing costs. We replaced the roof on both the structures. We were able to renovate one of the 2-bedroom units that ended up vacating, a bunch of stucco repair, plumbing repair stuff.
So you goes on a 4-unit with, I think I heard you say, a bunch of land for 1.5, and you put no money down, VA loan, and got $65,000 credit.
Right.
And that was a tough negotiation. That's awesome, man. That's a great way. That's a great way to procure a piece of property. So you started doing this work. You've got one of the units ready to go. How did it go with the rest of the tenants?
Well, so step back one thing. So you mentioned like it was a large lot. So the X factor piece, we talked about like the basics of what you're looking for, price point, location, that kind of thing. The stuff that you should absolutely always take into consideration. I think you asked earlier about investing strategy. And I think that the biggest thing for me is X factor, right? Like if it's a cookie cutter and it's like 1 of 10, there's no X factor for me. And it's like, okay, what's the upside? Why is this one going to bring in more money than my neighbor's house at some point? And so that's really important for me from an investment perspective. So this one had the largest lot. It had a covered RV parking with like hookups and power. It's got 2 metal, like really nice, like roll up door storage units on the back. And it's got coin operated laundry.
Okay.
So that stuff combined is like $1,300 a month in additional income.
Enough to move the needle.
Yeah, you rent exactly. That's like picking up another studio unit on that property.
Absolutely.
Right. So now it's effectively a 5 unit from a math perspective.
Yeah.
So that was the reason why we got so aggressive. I mean, obviously we got a good deal on it, but it's still a lot of money and they're still taking on a bunch of risks. So it's like, what's the X factor? And then later, if me and my neighbor are both for sale, like why is somebody going to pick mine and pay me what I want versus my neighbor, right? Because I have stuff my neighbor doesn't have.
There's a lot of value there.
Yeah. So then we inherit the tenants. And
which is normal. I mean, people get tenants, and sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard. But this one was maybe more difficult than normal. How did you play it out?
Yeah, so I think big picture, everything works out really well, just like you wanted to. You inherit the ones that you want to inherit. Obviously we have to occupy one of the properties, so the tenant in the biggest unit was given a notice to vacate. They didn't respond to that, right? They failed to vacate on the date.
But they kept paying rent, right? A quality professional tenant move. If given notice to comply or if in negotiation, as long as you keep paying rent, you technically aren't in violation of anything, especially when that rent is received. And us landlords, we have a rock and a hard place here. Like if I don't take that money, well, I'm not getting any money. And now I've got to go down that legal route. If I do take the money, I'm hoping to get a negotiation to come to some kind of terms where I can get the tenant out.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, like I think there's 2 sides to it, right? I think being in my shoes, having the right people as a sounding board to like, hey, what do I even do about this is really important. And I think that's a part of when people are looking to make an investment, they need to have resources, they need to have a team. Because even being in the business as long as I've been doing it, I don't know all the ins and outs about this. And I own multiple properties at this time. I have rentals. I've been managing rentals for a while. And now there's so much like nuance and things have to be done exactly a certain way. And so if you don't have that resource, it could be a lot harder on you. And then the timeline could be a lot longer. So anyhow, so we ended up kind of going in and we kept, we took the rent, which was nice because they were still paying. And at the time we didn't really know like, okay,
how's it going to all shake out?
What are they going to do? Are they just waiting to find a place or are they just straight not going to do what we asked them to do?
And I got to be honest, for people out there, like that's not a negative thing to do. Take the rent. Like when you want to stop taking the rent, you better be all in on going the legal route. So it makes sense to take the rent and continue to let it play out and work it through. So continue on.
Well, nowadays we have landlords, right? We have people like that are investing in real estate to give people a place to live. And then hopefully you have good landlords that want to give you a great place to live and they want to make some money. They want to use their money and invest. Yeah. But you also have professional tenants these days. And there's so much available on the internet and there's like tutorials on how to like get over on your landlord if you wanted to do it. And so every once in a while you run into people that have enough knowledge, just enough to be dangerous and cost you a bunch of money. And then you have to make a decision on like, okay, what do I do here? Do I stop, like you said, stop taking it, get an attorney, do all the things? And so I think that the more resources you have and more access to individuals that know this stuff, you can shorten that timeline a lot, right? Like if somebody doesn't know, you're 4 months into it and you're like, what's going on here? What do I do? And then you talk to an attorney and they're like, well, you're starting from day one because you haven't done any of the stuff you have to do. So if you're going to make an investment, the point of that is if you're going to make an investment like that, one of the pieces you being financially ready, that's what will help you take care of. But have the right people on your team so that if there is a bump in the road, it doesn't end up, totaling the vehicle, right? you hit the bump in the road, somebody fixes a tire real quick, and you go on.
Right.
But yeah, so that ended up being, not, I wouldn't, like, a nightmare is probably not the right word to use, because we were prepared, and we have money set aside, and it's not the end of the world. But I mean, it is 6 to 7 months of not receiving rent on a 3-bedroom, 2-bath detached house in San Diego County.
Right.
So you guys can do the math at home. It's probably $4,000 a month.
Wow.
Plus they have the RV parking. Plus they have the storage units that were rented to them at the time. So now you're $4,700 a month. And so that adds up. Then you got to pay the attorney. But anyhow, at the end of the day, what we look at that is like, okay, this is cost of acquisition, right? This is cost of being a landlord. Let's do the math. Like, just as a, devil's advocate here on the other side of this coin, everything we're talking about, it's like, oh my God, they got a tenant, no money, rent for 6 months, and the attorney fees, and why would we do this? And it's like, well, if this thing appreciates at 5% a year, which I think is low for San Diego County, in 20 years, we're talking $5.4 million. There's no other way that I could take 6 months of rent and $5,000 in attorney fees and put that in a mutual fund, and it's going to be worth anywhere near that. So it's a cost of acquisition. It's a cost of doing business.
This is great. And even if, let's say, the total out of pocket, and this is not to downplay in any way, but let's say it's like 65, 70, 75 grand in total.
Mm-hmm.
This is what, 5%?
Yeah.
Is that 6% of the overall cost that went towards that? So again, money's money in it, and it can derail any good investment, but in the grand scheme of things, it could be a lot worse.
Yeah. It doesn't make it, not stressful, but again, when we're penciling all this stuff out, like this is a long-term, like, real estate's a long-term game, whether you're doing flips or whatever you're doing, like, those are, blips on the radar, but, overall owning real estate is a long-term game for the most part, for the average consumer. And so you have to look at it from the long term. And at the end of the day, when we're penciling all this out in 10 or 15 years, when we're deciding on what to do with this, we won't even remember what it costs.
5 years from today, Chris, you're going to be like, yeah, I remember that. It's a good story. It's a great learning lesson, but it didn't derail an overall quality investment.
Right. Yeah.
Walk me through how it ended out, where we're at now, and why we're smiling now versus where we were before.
I mean, it ended up working out. I mean, it was kind of like, from that perspective, it's all textbook, right? If you do the right things, if you have the right people on the team, you execute the game plan, and you don't screw it up by trying to, intervene in whatever your attorney or your whoever else is telling you what to do. You don't say something stupid or, do something that you're not supposed to do that hits the reset button and go back to square one. Then it all goes according to plan. And so that's what it did. We had to get a little creative. I mean, we have people going by the property. There's some people out there that run some services where they kind of show up suited and booted, very official looking, just checking in to make sure the move out date is still coming along, and that's got a way of motivating people, I think. So
shout out to Anthony Avila.
Yeah.
He's quite good at what he does. Let's talk about a win then. Let's go over. We talked about a tough deal, but let's talk about an actual win in the last, couple minutes that we got here. That I know you have single families in San Antonio, and I want to try to wrap real quick on how that worked out well for you.
Yeah. The San Antonio piece, I think that there's people that are in this business, right? And they're in it every day, and they're experts, and their ears super close to the ground, and they know what's going on. Right. And then there's the average consumer, right? So there's like the person who does it professionally, like somebody like us. Then there's the average consumer that's going about their day to day. They're going to work 9 to 5, whatever they're doing. And they're just kind of grabbing the headlines of what's going on. Right. And I think that there is some value in paying attention to those headlines. Yeah. So like the big news of, hey, this company is leaving this state and moving to this one. Well, where are they moving? Yeah. This company's taking, 14,000 employees or whatever they are, and they're relocating them to this area. Okay, well, what area is that? Like, where's that business moving to, and what's that going to be doing to the surrounding real estate? And so that's how San Antonio got on the radar, because there was a bunch of companies moving out there. It was also at the time where Austin was being priced out. You were almost seeing California prices in Austin.
Right.
Everybody's moving south, and so San Antonio and Austin aren't that far apart, and there's all these little suburbs in between. And people that are relocating, that are used to commuting, that's not a big deal. So even if you're going to work in Austin, some of these places on the road in between San Antonio and Austin are candidates for people that are selling their, coastal state properties and moving out there. So that's what we saw the writing on the wall there. And so me and my wife, we just jumped on a flight and took off and drove around and looked at houses for the weekend, and we threw a couple offers in. We didn't even end up, like the house we own, like one of the places we own out there, we've never even seen it. I've never even seen it. And we've had it since 2020, right? So it's been nearly 5 years, and I've never seen it. I've never set foot in it. I don't know anything about it really, other than the check shows up on the first of the month every month. I have a property manager out there that takes care of everything. Hey, there was a plumbing thing. Here's the invoice. You're good. So, I know where it is. I know the development that it was built in. We saw it was a new build that we bought. San Antonio, also understand your market. I generally wouldn't be overly excited about new build, but San Antonio has soils issues, right? So if out there, a lot of the properties that are resale, they need foundation work when you buy them, and that can add to the cost. And so when you buy a new build, foundation's owned by that builder for 10 years. So we're going to get to year 9 and a quarter and a half. And we're going to pop it on the market. Yeah.
This is a great contrast, Chris, between, hey, in my backyard, I got a multifamily type of deal, and it turned out good, but it had some hair on it where, your philosophy on getting the right location and doing it out of state on a single family and still coming up rosy. So I really appreciate you painting, in the short time we had, the two different pictures and how an investor can be successful on both avenues. I want to wrap it up by asking you maybe some lasting piece of advice for young entrepreneurs, maybe the last 30 seconds or so, what you're telling them if they want to get into the real estate industry, especially in investment. What piece of advice are you giving them?
So specifically to the new investor, right? There's so much noise on the internet and social media with all these people that are telling you to do all these different things with real estate and what the number is and how much cash flow you should or should not have. And so, I'm talking to the person who's sitting there and they're going, hey, I've got this little bit of a nest egg saved up and I want to put it into real estate, but all these things seem like they're so kind of outside of my grasp, and I got to make cash flow, and I'm doing the numbers with a mortgage guy, and I can't really figure out how am I supposed to make this cash flow when I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to move into it and put 5% down. How am I supposed to cash flow? Rates are 6.5%, 7%. So I think from a young investor's perspective, you have to change that mindset. All the clickbaity stuff, obviously having cash flow on a property, that's the dream, that's the idea. But getting your foot in the door and starting that journey is so much more important, or there is no cash flow journey without that first step in getting in the door. So it's just a mindset shift. So, for example, we'll go back to the 4-unit property that we have. I don't cash flow on that property. I actually, after I break even with what it's now rented for, now that we're out and we have that main unit rented, I basically pay the mortgage and some of the basic expenses, but we're still kicking in a fair amount for some of those utilities. So I'm actually paying about $1,000 a month to own that property, but it's a $1.75 million fourplex. And if somebody said hey, I'll give you this thing, you just pay me $1,000 a month for it, that's a no-brainer all day. But a lot of people that are new at this and they're getting into it, that scares them because they want to make money right away. It's well, dude, you can't buy a house with minimum down in this market,
just get out of it,
in this physical location, this area, Southern California, and have it day one. It just doesn't work that way.
Chris, everything you're saying makes sense. And that big takeaway of get your foot in the door, get a professional team behind you, and get yourself set up for success for future investment. So everybody, Chris Catania, thank you so much for being here with me. Everybody, thanks for tuning into our CashFlow podcast, the podcast where we talk about turning properties into profits. We'll see you next week.